Well, hello and welcome everyone. It's great to have everyone back for our second session for our fourth day of the First Responders Summit. So very excited to have a great conversation about how we can involve families and carers and loved ones more in what we're doing and in our conversations. But before that, just wanted to give you a little bit of background and insight into where we're coming from. So Wellbeing Australia is bringing this event to you today, and we are a not-for-profit that is totally funded by our members. So we are not associated to any agencies, any government, or any other organisations in terms of funding. So everything we do is for our members and determined by our members. We work broadly with the community in terms of what they're wanting and what factors around wellbeing they're being challenged with. And that's where we bring events from, which is very much where today has come from. A few other things about Wellbeing Australia. We are a positive, proactive organisation. So we totally respect that when you speak of wellbeing, there's a lot of different organisations and different structures of how people work. Our focus is recognising that life has ups, life has downs, and we want to help you in both of those points and all the range between to set yourself up for success. So to learn those strategies that will work well for you or that you may want to trial to improve yourself and your wellbeing. We know that there's fabulous agencies working on those that are severely depressed or anxious and other situations, and we support them. But our focus is that positive solution-focused work so that we can help you at all of those points of your life. We are a national organisation. We've been very fortunate to have people dialing in from all around the world for this summit, which is very exciting, and thrilled to be able to share and come together as a broader community. So the First Responders Summit, what we're bringing you today has come from our, as I said, community in terms of we need more for those people that are working in first response, formally or informally. So those that are wearing uniform, those that are volunteering, family members, and those that have finished their service and are still trying to work through different things that they may have experienced. The themes of our summit have come about how we can set you up for that best wellbeing. And so the theme is very strongly around living well. And when we're talking about living well, we see three components to that. We see connection, and that's connection with yourself and your values and your purpose, connection with others around you, and being able to bring those values and beliefs together. It's also about hope, so that when you are in times where you are in crisis or you are experiencing difficulty, you have hope that there will be better days, that there will be opportunities moving forward to be and feel in a better space. And finally, community. And as I mentioned, that's a broad global community as much as that local community that you may be part of. So that's really when we're speaking about our conference, everything has come through from those areas in terms of how do we set ourselves up for success, no matter where we are in terms of our own wellbeing at this point in time. So just before I start, you'll notice down the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. Now, we are here for you, and we really do invite your comments and questions. Please pop them in there. You can be anonymous in that Q&A box, and you can share your thoughts. The only thing I will mention, as I mentioned, we are not associated to any particular organisations or agencies, so we're not here to talk about funding models or structures and organisational systems. We're here to talk about how we can help people at that individual level. So any of your questions or comments around your personal experience or those things you wish to improve on or get some feedback and ideas, we are here for you. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome, oh, that was very quick. I'm going to welcome Steve to join us in his role, helping us as a panel at the moment of one. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you, welcome. Thank you, Catherine.
So can you give us a little bit of background? You've had such a fantastic background covering a number of different services, but areas, and in your current role with Surf Lifesaving New South Wales. Can you give us a glimpse into where, where you've come from and how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, look, thanks, Catherine, and greetings everyone. Good evening, and it's great to be here for I guess the next 45 minutes or so anyhow. Yeah, so basically, I've been really blessed within the first responder community and emergency services community that I've actually worn quite a few uniforms, and I've had a plethora of experiences, right across the gamut. Everything that we have as a family is attributable to, my time with the emergency services, and obviously, there's been good times and bad times, but Probably to lead it out, in 1985, that's when I first began as a probationary firefighter with the New South Wales Fire Brigades at the time. It's now known as Fire Rescue New South Wales. But I joined it in 1985, and from there I progressed right through the ranks as a probationary firefighter, all the way through to a chief superintendent when I left 25 years later. During that period, I served at virtually every metropolitan fire station in Sydney, and I did extensive country service as well. That really gave me a great appreciation of both, first responders, what they do in the city, but also importantly, what they face out in the country areas as well. After 25 years, I had a great opportunity and was requested to look at a position as a Deputy Commissioner with the New South Wales State Emergency Service. So I went from a pure fire background straight down to the New South Wales State Emergency Services in 2010. And I remained there for 5 years as a Deputy Commissioner. It was quite interesting that within 6 months of me being there, New South Wales was impacted by the largest floods it had in its history, both in 2010 and 2012. So very quickly had to, straddle the challenges of being fire-centric and then being flood-centric as well. From the New South Wales State Emergency Service, then I had another great opportunity to take up the role as Chief Executive Officer of probably what is the most iconic organisation in Australia, Surf Life Saving New South Wales. And I'm here currently to this time. I've been here almost 4 years now, have a membership of around 76,000 members. And we've taken that organisation on a really transformational journey over those 4 years to actually now become one of Australia's first gazetted emergency services as a surf lifesaving agency. So again, I find myself back well within the emergency services again.
Fascinating journey, and there's a lot of pressure in that role you've chosen to take on, isn't there? As you say, it's a highly valued and it's not often identified as first responder, and yet you guys are seeing a lot in that life-saving, and there's such a range. So can you give us a context of your community? You told us how sort of huge it is. What's the mix in your community?
Yeah, so look, within our community, surf lifesaving, it is actually really enormous, and it covers a very broad spectrum. So as I said, 2 years ago, we were gazetted as an emergency service, but sitting outside of that, we are the aquatic coastal rescue agency in New South Wales. So, people historically have always regarded us as just looking after the red and yellow flags. We have 76,000 members. Out of those 76,000 members, every year, approximately around 21,000 are active members. That is, toes in the sand, responding to incidents up and down, the New South Wales coastline. The role has morphed, quite considerably in regards to, it used to be, just that summer agency. So, people would just attribute surf lifesaving to be there in the summer times, but it's now a 24/7 agency. We basically operate 24/7, 12 months of the year. Within the organisation, we don't just have volunteer lifesavers, we have the largest cohort of paid professional lifeguards as well. We have around 450 lifeguards that manage 65% of the coastal council contracts in New South Wales. We are the largest provider of UAV surveillance services in Australia. So we have around 400 trained UAV, that's drone pilots. We fly anything up to 80 drones a day. We fly around 15,000 missions a year for shark surveillance and for rescue surveillance operations as well. Outside of that, as I said, we support other emergency services. So we're written into all the major New South Wales emergency plans. So we support the New South Wales SES in floods and storms and tempests. We're also written into the New South Wales tsunami plan. So obviously it's a bit of a DER factor that if a big tsunami is coming down, well, we're on the beach basically waiting for it to try and evacuate everyone as well. So it's an extremely broad area. And what I really love about the organisation is we are a pure representation of community. So, we have such broad diversity within the organisation that you have to cater for.
And that's the key, isn't it? I think it's something that we see in different agencies, but in different ways. So in talking about that theme of tonight, the families and carers and loved ones that can feel a little bit detached or can feel a bit separate. I'm assuming in your organisation it's a little bit different, because you're looking from an organisational level at how you're involving families and community, as well as I imagine from a personal level.
No, it is. It's a really fascinating situation, and when you look at other emergency services, whether it be police or ambulance, RFS, fire rescue, you will always come across, I guess, family linkages or lineages in there as well. So, there might be fathers and sons or fathers and daughters in there as well. In surf lifesaving, it's actually that again on steroids. So, we would have quite often in many clubs, and we have 129 clubs up and down the New South Wales coast, we would have whole family units that sit within those clubs. And whole family units that either patrol together on the same patrol, or they're spread right across, each patrol within the club. And so when an incident happens, and excuse the pun, but it ripples right throughout the entire family. So if one family is exposed to a critical incident, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something people think is a massive emergency, then that obviously has an effect on the rest of the family as well. So when we actually respond and stand up to critical incidents, we don't just look at the person directly involved. We have to look at that broad ripple effect that's right throughout the family. And I think what we really value is we are a family. So 129 clubs, it's 129 tribes, but we are extremely family and community orientated, and I think that makes a little bit of a difference compared to some of the other emergency services.
And it's interesting you say that, because we're hearing from different areas or different services, and some have that community orientation and some don't. It really depends almost where they are and who they're being led by. And our earlier conversation today was about that sense of belonging and how we're driven to emergency services because of that sense of belonging. We're driven to first responder roles or agencies or volunteering because we want to actually have that connection. So one of the questions that came through earlier that I think is such a critical question, and it's come through a number of times, but very much from that family piece, excuse the airplanes over me, very much from the family piece of families experiencing vicarious trauma. They're experiencing the trauma, and you mention it, and I'm sure you would have examples of what's happened with you guys in your past world as much as now. But what's your advice? What's your experience around that? Like you said, that ripple effect, and how families can manage that.
Yeah, look, and you're exactly right. And I think people sometimes underestimate what they bring home, or the effect that it's had on them back into the family unit. And I could probably relate on a couple of levels here, Catherine. So, look, personally, I can remember in fire and rescue. Unfortunately, you're exposed to a whole myriad of instances, and I know personally, I was exposed to quite a significant amount of really critical traumatic events. Multiple deceased persons. You see things that the human being really shouldn't have to see, and you do things that human beings really shouldn't be asked to do that as well. And you feel that you have the resilience yourself, but the issue is sometimes you don't, and you bring that trauma back home either through your behaviours, just through your emotions as well, and you can be blindsided by them, and this is where people really need to understand what tools are there to be able to identify when I am being impacted, and how would I transfer that back to my family. And in my family, we have two police officers living in the same household here, a son and his soon-to-be fiance. And again, so I really worry for them, and I really look out for them, because I know what the triggers and I know what the indicators are, so I can pick it up for them. In surf lifesaving, it is true. We put a lot of resources in the last 2 years in critical incident wellbeing and health of our members. So, right from the top, where we have, wellbeing officers within the organisation, the way that we interact with people personally and directly as well. And I guess trying to live those values as leaders in the organisation about it's okay not to be okay.
And that's a really important phrase, isn't it? That it's okay not to be okay, because it is, we have those days. We are human, and that's going to happen. You mentioned that, you know, the tools around the impacts and the strategies, those that looking for those warning signs. Can you help our audience? We've got such a breadth of audience in terms of who's there. What should they be looking for in their own families?
Yeah, so we try and impart this knowledge and this information to families of our lifesavers. So in my current role, it's so important to look after the family as much as it is to look after the person as well. And so, you know, we talk about, I guess, the indicators of persons' behavioural changes as well. And we don't try to do some psychological analysis. It's just merely the fact that, you know, for myself, and I saw this personally with some introspection, but you become withdrawn. You know, you don't become as talkative. You know, your emotions are a lot more heightened. You know, your sleep patterns are sometimes disjointed because, you know, you continually are thinking about this as well. Someone that is normally really renowned for great resilience and great strength just have anxiety attacks, or just can't process just some of the simple things going forward. And I have no doubt that some of your other speakers have probably spoken about it, but it's that analogy of, you know, you have to think about just that glass of water, and you've got to think about the cumulative effect of each time someone sees it, that their glass is getting higher and higher. And it's just a matter of, how does a person know how to empty some of that to make it to stop it from overflowing? And unfortunately, a lot of us, our glass overflows, and a lot of us will always find ourselves in a dark room. You know, someone once told me, they said, you know, as an emergency responder, said it's like walking a corduroy road. You have your highs and you have your troughs, but you'll always have a high and you'll always have a trough. And anyone that thinks they can sit on an even keel, you know, I really think you've got to give yourself a really good hard look in the mirror, because, you know, you will always have those peaks and troughs.
It's so true, isn't it? And they vary, right? Where we're at and what's happening in different parts of our world vary, but definitely you have, and there's a lot of philosophies that say we have to have the highs to have the lows and whatnot, sort of thing. So there's a balance element from there as well. So you mentioned your own family. You're living this on every possible sphere at the moment. So it must be an exhausting life that you're living. If it was one of your children that you'd noticed these things in, if it was, you know, your partner or anything like that, and you're going, hang on, something's not right, they're withdrawn, I'm seeing outbursts that they wouldn't normally have, how would you start the conversation? What would you say or do you think?
Yeah, look, and I think this is where it's so important not to make a stigma of this, and it's so important that to try and just treat it as a conversation, as normal conversation. And I'm really fortunate because my boys, they know I've been in the emergency services, so I guess I have a little bit of credit there in the bank, you know, to talk about it. But again, it's just sitting down talking about, you know, you're noticing a change in their behaviours, and you know, I actually try and ask them, and if I listen to the news or the social media and I see something happening, you know, how's your day? Were you involved with that? If you were, look, you know, just tell me about it, because sometimes just that. You know, I use the word diffusing, but I am not a professional here at all. It's just a matter of having that conversation through with them. You know, it does go a long way, and because sometimes actually makes them aware of their own emotions. But what I would suggest is that, you know, if you are really concerned, you have to reach out to their employer. You have to say, look, I'm actually seeing some changes in Stephen's behaviour at home, and I'm just really concerned that he's either seeing something or he's been involved with something that I don't know about. You know, can you help me here in regards to understanding, you know, some of the things? And this is where, I guess, organisations like Surf Lifesaving, we find it a lot easier, even though we have 76,000 members and we are an enormous organisation. We're actually still quite a boutique organisation that you can have that personal interface and that accessibility to the leaders in the organisation. And I think in some other entities, and from my own experience, sometimes it's a bit harder to get that one-on-one or that direct contact with some of those senior persons or officers or leaders in those organisations. And I think this comes down to this point of accessibility.
And I think that's interesting comment, because some of the things we've noticed are exactly that, is what's happening at that middle and that senior leadership to make the framework more accessible, because as you say, we may not know what's happened, but we need to be able to connect with someone else who's going to be more informed so we can prevent. And just like I said, Wellbeing Australia is very focused on that preventative strategy. And I think historically, a lot of what we've done has been patchwork based on the extreme. We've waited for people to have extreme PTSD before we engage in these things. We're now saying, hang on a minute, trauma's part of the job. Trauma's coming, going, it's happening consistently. Our cup is overflowing at different points for different reasons. We have to be more organized. A great questions come through saying, you know, being an active member of Surf Lifesaving, there's excellent EAP. My question just popped away, there we go. And support services available. And the question is, what has been the change over the years to drive this? Has it been societal or a greater awareness of that link between physical and mental health? Where's it coming from?
Yeah, look, I think for us, it came from a lot of areas. I know when I first came to the organisation, because mental health and wellbeing was so important to me, because, you know, I know that over the years that, you know, that I have been a sufferer, you know, from some of the things I've seen in the past, and it was just really important for me to make sure that our people were going to be looked after as well. But in saying that, because as surf lifesavers, people think it's only just drownings or near drownings that you may see, but, you know, really tragically, a lot of our lifesavers are involved in a lot of self-harm incidents, because, you know, we're the first ones on the shore, or our boats go out to assist other agencies to do this as well. So, you know, we had a spike quite a few years ago, particularly in the northern beaches, you know, of youth suicides, and it really brought it to the fore in regards to, well, what the hell are we really doing, and how are we looking after our people? And it's not, we shouldn't be just reactive. It's how do we actually tool our people up and give them the authority to be able to seek assistance if needed. And yes, you know, we've got great EAP, we've got great welfare officers, we've got some great collateral that you can read out, but I honestly believe that we have an authentic commitment as an organisation, like the board, even the chairman of the board. You know, he's an active lifesaver, but also an active duty officer that goes to a lot of these incidents. So he sees it firsthand. So we've got a really strong commitment through the board, through our executive senior leadership team. You know, I don't think there's a person, Catherine, in the organisation that just looks at this with disdain, or it's a tick in the box or a KPI. You know, I think it's, for us, it's really important, and we are very committed to it. So, you know, you may see our corporate strategic plans, and you'll read about it in there, and it's there, but you'll actually see us living and breathing it all the time, or as much as we possibly can.
So I'll come back to families in a minute, because you raised a really good question there. But on that organisational level, because I think that's the thing, right? Actually living and breathing it, because so many organisations have their wellbeing plan and they've got their policies and their strategies and all of the rest of it. But like you said, living it and bringing it to life is a very different thing. How have you managed to do that? Yeah,
look, so for us, we make it a conversation all the time. So we always have within our conversation about mental health or wellbeing in anything we do. We've incorporated a big theme of that in our training now for our bronze medallion with our people that go through to do the bronze medallion. And to your point earlier on, we actually tell them, you will see some things, and you are going to be involved in some things that are basically pretty yucky, and you just have to accept that that's going to happen. But we also, you know, we give people permission to say, look, I am not okay. So, you know, there's a lot of conversations all the time. You know, we try and really demonstrably support it as much as we can. And again, I think in our particular instance, Catherine, that we're really fortunate that a lot of us have had a touch point in this world. So we know personally, you know, what it feels like. So, you know, we're not just a bureaucrat trying to impart this on our people. We actually have been touched by it. We know, you know, the impacts, but we also know, you know, the good things that come out of it as well, and how to strengthen ourselves for any future incidents.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming back to that personal one that I mentioned before, what about for you? When have you had to reach out for help? When have you as a family had that, you know, that moment with wellbeing where you've needed to sort of draw back and ask for help or face that challenge?
Yeah, look, I think for me, there's probably an organisational one and a personal one. An organisational one was when I was transferred out to the bush, I got transferred to Tamworth, and I was there for about 3.5 years, and I looked after around 140,000 square kilometres of estate, which it was an enormous area. Now, in the country, because of the road networks and whatnot, it was in the heart of the drought. Our firefighters were responding to multiple fatalities all the time. And it was important for me and also the other executives that we would be out there on scene to support our firefighters, whether it be car accidents or self-harms or whatever. It all sort of culminated to me at one point where I went to a particular incident up at Armidale that involved some young children, and basically, I guess fell off my perch. It just really built up to me, and I had to go seek some help, and I was directed to go get some help. And I was directed. I didn't put my hand up. I was directed to go do it. And when I sat down and we had to recount, well, how many, and I hate to say this, but how many fatal incidents have you been into in the last 18 months? And I got up to 28 personally. And they said, well, that's it. It was just this cumulative effect. And my wife recognised it as well. And it was just, a horrible time in your career. And back in the day too there, Catherine, there was no permission to be vulnerable. Like I didn't want anyone to know, because I thought if I was known as a strong firefighter and a responder, but if that got out, well, sometimes people think that's the end of your career. So there was a lot of a stigma. We had to try and shield that as well. But, I think for me, I had some really great support, and they said, look, it's okay not to be okay. And in fact, you're seen as having greater strength if you show greater vulnerability. And that also always really stuck with me. So, for me, that's what I've tried to push right through, the fire services. When I came back, when I went to the SES, we did exactly the same thing to make sure we shored up, our wellbeing programs. And we had a commissioner there at the time, Murray Keir, who was just like such a wonderful commissioner and so devoted to this as well. And then obviously coming over to surf lifesaving, again, it was there, it needed to be done, and it was just so embraced by the organisation to formalise it as well.
Your comment is so true, though, that it's seen as a weakness, right? And it's a historical thing, because as that question earlier mentioned, where there is a change culture happening, but there is this perception for us to be vulnerable or ask for help or need help, we must be falling apart. There must be a big problem, right? And we need to break that down. That is a stigma that's incorrect, because actually if we are asking for help, we're trying to mend. How did you feel, and I hope it's all right to ask, but how did you feel when that was directed to you? Because that's a really unique thing, because you, as you said, you're that brave face of, no, I got this, and someone's gone, actually you don't. And when you do the math, fair enough too. How did it feel?
Yeah, look, I think I think at the time, the direction to go see someone was probably, there was another motive there as well, because we had to shore up the executive support out in the bush. And at the time, we were trained to look after our people, but no one was looking after us. And that was a really unique thing that was, and I actually felt like a slap in the face. And I talked to some of the other senior executives in other emergency services and police and ambulance, and you're trained to look after your people, but you turn around and you think, well, who's looking after me as well? And I was just fortunate that it was reported back. I actually felt really embarrassed to have to go see someone, and to say you had to go see a psychiatrist. I'm thinking, this is not good. This is not me. But once I started having the conversations, I felt, look, it's okay to be okay. And in fact, to tell the truth, each time I spoke about it, the more I felt I was getting stronger. And then, once you're given some tools to know that, look, you are going to go into a dark room, and occasionally, we all go into the dark room, but it's just a matter of how you find that light switch in your own dark room to turn that on to come back out into normal life again.
And that's so true, isn't it? Everybody's got their dark room, and it's the first conversation is always the awkward one, whether it's with one of your colleagues at work, whether it's with family at home, whatever. But being able to actually take that opportunity to start that conversation. So,
but I'd say it's so much. I'd have to say it's so much easier now, because I honestly feel there's so much more acceptance now, and it is a general conversation all the time that people will come out and talk about, look, I'm actually struggling, and do that. And unfortunately, I guess, there probably are some instances in some organisations where people won't do that because for fear that it will stifle their promotion going forward. And I think in that instance, that's where the conversations need to be had. As I said, I've had some fantastic bosses over the years, and so you've always been able to have that conversation going forward. And I hope that that's the way that that I lead, some of our people as well, to say it is fine to come out and have that conversation.
And I think that starting that conversation is the key, right? In a family perspective, a great questions come through, and we've heard this a number of times this week, but how do you suggest we raise mental health with, a person, whoever's around us, if we feel they're in denial or they are in denial? We're saying we think they're not okay and they're going, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. What would be your recommendation there?
Look at, I guess I wish I had the silver bullet here to say this is how you do it, because it is such a hard, tricky conversation to have. And again, I find it easier because I feel I have credibility. And I think, for those people that say, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I've been in that situation, and I can see that there is something not right at the moment, with this off. And we get taught with some of our programs in regards to how to approach it as well. But again, it's a difficult situation. But I think you just have to have that conversation. And I don't think there's an easy way around it, Catherine. You just you got to take it head on, and just try and couch it as empathetically as possible, and not to say there's something wrong with you and your work's really bad at the moment. I would much prefer to just try and focus on, look, I think there's something off at the moment with your behaviours. Is there anything you can tell me, what you want to tell me? And you've got to have trust. That's the thing. Like, if you can't build that I guess that cylinder of trust for them to come forward and tell you that, well, they're not going to do it, because once you defy that, it's gone.
Absolutely. And now I think that's the challenge for people in a family setting or in a closed setting, where the person coming home in their uniform feels like that's their sense of purpose, that's their role, that's their security, that's their the value they offer to the family. In many cases, that's what they feel. And so for them to be perceived like they're not in control, they may feel a lesser version of themselves. One of the comments we had come through was timing and language, which you've touched on. That language, don't be prepared to have the tough conversation, but pick your words. But one of the comments we had from another speaker was, pick your timing so the person's not just walking in the door and you're jumping on it.
Totally. And I think it's interesting, and because we were talking obviously earlier before this, and I think some people in emergency services and as first responders, the uniform defines them, and they feel that if I've got this uniform on, I'm wearing the badge, well, I should have greater resilience and greater courage, and it shouldn't be happening to me. And yet you see in family units, people that don't wear the badge and don't have that armour of a uniform, they suffer just as much as others. And it can just infiltrate right throughout the entire family.
And you mentioned the suicides on the northern beaches and things like that. And there is a flow on, because it's not always just the person in uniform that's turning up. It's the person who happened to be on the beach, or someone who was walking down the path and saw it happen, and all of these sorts of things, or the person who is part of your volunteer service who happens to know that person and see that. So I think that reaction, that response of what a first responder looks like now is quite different. Great questions come through on that, in terms of how can first responders who need to de-stress at home, which is absolutely right, so releasing that cup, like you said, speak to their families and sometimes share it, but deal with also trying to protect their families. So where's the line, right, between me releasing and being able to process, but also protecting my family from what I don't want them to know is happening at work, possibly?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, because we're all rescuers, and we all want to rescue our own family, and we want to shield our own family so they don't worry about us. And I don't think, I very rarely ever came home and I'd say to Leanne, look, I was at a fatality of 4 people today, and it was so horrible for this and that. I would just say, look, I went to a really yucky incident today, and it was pretty ordinary, and just helped me recalibrate my own self, and what's important in life as well. And so I think it's to come home, and sometimes you need the space as well, because as you said, you don't want to walk straight in the door and people say, oh, look, I've just heard this has happened, and are you okay? But I think it's just to say, look, I've had a bad day. I've seen some stuff, or I've been involved in something. It's been a bad day. If I need some space, just let me have some space. But for me personally, one of my panaceas to get around this is I love exercise. So my indicator to the family would be, I'm going to the gym right now. And so they know that I'm going up to de-stress, or I'm going out for a walk. And so they know that obviously there's been something, and I just need to go out and just process it, and then come back home, and you try and slip back into that normality again.
So we've all got to have that thing, don't we? It's that thing that just empties the cup a bit, gives us that space, gives it that de-stress. So exercise is obviously a great one for you. What other ones? You've got this gift of experience. What other things have you used to help release that steam?
Oh, look, again, it's, you've got to have a safe area for be able to talk to people. So I know I have certain friends and certain colleagues that I can actually reach out to straight away and say, look, I've had a bad day. I saw this, and what do you think? And you just try and replay the whole thing. For me, like exercise is a great thing. In emergency services, what I do love is I love the collegiality. If there's one thing I really miss out of in the uniform services, particularly, it's how you surround each other. And I think if you can find yourself in a situation where you have that fabric that can come back around you, that's another great thing, because you can all deal and talk a little bit about it in your same way. But from a family perspective, sometimes you don't want to, Catherine, you don't want to tell them that I go to these incidents, because then they will worry about you, and that's more worry that you have on yourself. So there isn't a simple answer, I don't think.
No, I agree with you, and it's so complex, right? There's so many moving parts, and there's so much to work out. And I think even just judging that, how much I share and how much I hold back is potentially adding that stress to people, right? So a good question that we've had, and I think it's a really relevant one, is looking at that family unit over your career and through the different stages of your family growth and whatnot like that. Have you changed how you de-stress over that time, and how?
Yeah, look, I think, I think when I talk about, the good things that come out of this as well, it's about how you actually build up your own resilience. And because you have to, if you don't build up your resilience and you don't have this preparedness, well, then you are going to suffer when an incident does occur. And I've been really fortunate to over the years build up this resilience through the emergency services. I've succumbed to it. I've been able to turn back around to it, and have that strength. And you talk about coming back into the family and what it means for your family. Well, our family, we're survivors of suicide. We've had a suicide in our family, and but I don't think we could have gotten through that if we didn't have the tools, from what we've learned, or what I've learned in the emergency services. And I think that's one of the reasons, Catherine, why I just have, I guess, such a passion and commitment to it.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? And suicide, unfortunately, is more visible now. It's a lot in media. There's a lot of discussion and whatnot. And you use that phrase, suicide survivor. You're equipped, as you say, from your experiences. What about those families that aren't? Though they may be in your community, or you may have met through the years. How would you suggest they start to work out how to deal with that?
Yeah, and again, look, I'm not an expert here at all. And I'll bring it back to surf lifesaving, because we're so large. We're such a large collective of community. If something happens in community, undoubtedly it happens in surf lifesaving. And so we unfortunately we regularly hear of families that have lost a loved one from self-harm, for whatever reason. And so we just immediately just try and put in some safety nets just to surround that. We don't try and go in to deal with the issue, because it's not our role at all. My personal opinion, experience is that you just need to be able to get up every morning and get one foot out of bed and just move on with life. Life will never be the same, and you have to accept that. But you have to accept you have to learn how to live again.
And it is those back to basics, isn't it? It's recognizing the small things. And sometimes when we're at that point, it is the small things. You've just got to go back and see them as a win for the day, right?
Oh, totally, yeah. And but in saying that too, how rewarding is it, and how great a feeling is it either for yourself or for the organisation if you can actually help someone part way on their journey. And for us in life saving, like we're trying to change the culture in regards to looking at it as not just as a surf club, but a community hub as well. So where we can look after community and we're not going to be psychiatrists or psychologists, but we definitely can be demonstrators on how we look after people, and try and look after people with the best of our ability.
And it's a different role, right? You're not trying to be the psychologist, but you're being a support, you're being part of that support network. And you mentioned you've got lots of resources and facilities with where you are now. One of the comments and questions has been, what about families in rural or remote areas do they have a larger role in that support network where there's not the resources? So do the families have to absorb more when the person is maybe isolated physically or losing their place in an organisation?
Yeah, look, I think for us, again, whether it be regional, whether it be a metropolitan, our resources and our outreach is almost exactly the same. So people can be in regional New South Wales, far south or far north, and we'll enact the same sort of support. And what a classic example of that would have been when we had those devastating bushfires on the far south coast. So we had our surf clubs stand up as evacuation centres and welfare centres straight away. We had dozens of our lifesavers who actually lost their own homes in the bushfires, yet were standing there back at the surf clubs helping all these other evacuees. And we still deal with the ripple effect of that, that trauma, from just not being directly involved, but the supporting part of it as well. And you talk about first responders, we have our state operations centre with our radio operators. So again, there's another group of people that we always have to look out for, because when you talk about vicarious trauma, they're on the radio, they're talking it, and they're hearing it all the time. So again, we have all these touch points, back for our people back, even though they're removed from the incident. We try and look at all those touch points as best we can. And don't get me wrong, we're not perfect. And sometimes we get slippages and someone will go through the crack, and hopefully we'll pick up that person that's fallen through the crack and be able to bring them back in. But we really are committed to try and do our best, for our lifesavers and their families.
And I think that's really relevant to all first responders, right? Particularly we're in that moment when we're responding to the crisis, that hyperdrive comes in and we're doing our service, we're doing what comes naturally, but it is the flow-on effect that comes. And I think we've seen that a lot with the bushfires and the floods and even COVID and those sorts of things that have been happening. Is it wasn't necessarily immediate, but it is that flow-on. So potentially we need to stop thinking of that crisis mode, but be looking for those things that are happening ongoing.
Yeah, but I think Catherine, this is where just that ongoing conversation comes into play. So, and you don't have to keep on going back saying, "Are you okay?" Don't get me wrong, I love "Are you okay" Day, but you don't have to keep on trying to drive that point. But as long as people know that you have the conversation and you're willing to have a conversation with them, and you're not going to judge anyone, I can tell you, I would have to say every second week I would have a staff member come to me and say, "Look, I might be struggling in this instance," and it has nothing to do with an emergency response or a critical incident. It's just got something to do with family or work pressure, pace of life. But I really love the fact that they will come to me and say that, and so we can try and then do something as well. And again, I just think, everyone uses this word authentic. I just think it's so important for any of the executives in the emergency services, particularly, that they have to be authentic when it comes to their commitment to well-being and mental health in the workplace, because I think people can read you pretty quickly if they think you're just trying it on.
So it's so true, isn't it? And that has been one of those moments where you're seeing who can and who can't, because it's not something you fake. You have to learn it, and you have to have that genuine, but it's that real essence of where it is. And we can't separate work, and we can't separate, even when we're volunteering, it's still part of who we are as a whole. So that family piece becomes key. Comments come through that many first responder organisations used to be quite male dominated. So that's starting to change. We're seeing that change. Do you think that this is having an effect on how families are being included, or what's happening there?
Yeah, look, so surf lifesaving, we've got a great gender balance in regards to our lifesavers as well. It's almost 50-50, females to males on the beach as well. So, and I just think again, people talk about the females bring the softer side to a situation or whatever. Females are just as vulnerable and susceptible to these as males. I love the fact that we're becoming a more gender balanced society, and we're really committed for us, in regards to inclusivity, for the organisation moving forward, because we have to reflect community. But yeah, look, I don't think because you have more females in the workforce that it becomes any easier. Perhaps it might become easier for some blokes that feel like I'm a bit safer talking to a female colleague than I am to a male colleague. So perhaps, that's probably the advantage.
Of opportunity, isn't it? It's being able to have access to different people, and that comfort and that trust that you spoke of before is a large part of whether I'm going to be comfortable to start this conversation or not. Questions come through that if a member of a first responder family came to you concerned about their loved one, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the first piece of advice would to thank them to come forward, but to also give them an assurance that because they've come forward, that we definitely have this on the radar and we are going to action it. So, just to give them the confidence that, as an organisation, we are going to follow it through. Again, for us, and I'm really fortunate that I have so many staff and managers that are so committed to this as well, that I could put anyone in touch with that particular person to make sure that they had the resources there. We have some instances, Catherine, where even though we have an EAP program, and we have one for staff and we have another one for volunteers as well, we will often activate the EAP program for families or for volunteers in non-surf related events. So, we'll sometimes hear about a volunteer that's been involved in a CPR in George Street in the city. And we've heard that through the family, and we will enact all our resources, and we tell the family we will commit those resources as much as we can for that person and the family as well. So I think it just comes back to just demonstrating that you will follow it through, and again, we're just fortunate that we were funded to be able to bring on some resources where we actually just don't have one touch point, but then we within a month we have two separate phone calls, direct personal phone calls to the person, or sometimes has to be to the family. So it's not just an email, it's just not a text. We try and personalise it as much as we can, and not everyone can do that, but we're just fortunate that we are able to do that in our situation.
The community is very lucky to have so much investment, like genuine, as you say, authentic investment. What about for those that are in agencies that are not as robust and organised as you? What if it was just someone I ran into at the local barbecue, we're at a mate's place for a barbecue, and they've sort of said, hey, I'm a bit worried about this. What would you do then? Yeah,
look, again, I think from personal experience, I know many years ago, and I know this agency has put in some great frameworks and structures now, but I used to have some friends that were paramedics, and we would go to family barbecues, and if there's ever a profession that would have a cumulative risk, it's these guys and girls. And I can remember being at a barbecue, and I could hear them, and you could actually see that in their eyes that they just weren't right. You could see that they were trying to mask it, they were coping, but they weren't. So, I actually reached out to some of their colleagues, and, to try and raise the situation and raise the awareness. And so, again, I would probably, I'd be really surprised, Catherine, if there's not an emergency service now, a first responder entity that doesn't have this firmly on their radar moving forward. I think it's probably, the difference would be just how committed are their leaders to it. I'm sure they have great frameworks and great resources. It's probably just a matter of how vulnerable do some of the senior leaders want to be in some of the organisations.
Yeah, and the feedback we've had is how, you mentioned it before, do I feel this is going to impact my career? Do I feel this, I'm going to be judged? So that culture of potential bullying, potential like that whole heroes culture of we need to man up sort of thing. There's people been saying I want to have that conversation, but I'm also feeling like it won't be okay if I do.
Yeah, but the thing is, I actually think the key to this conversation was unlocked just recently when Shane Fitzsimmons, when he was recounting talking to a colleague one night over the bushfires, and his colleague said, "Look, please don't tell anyone that I've spoken to you about this." And for Shane to actively actually talk about that particular incident, so he hasn't divulged the identity of anyone, but he's actually spoken about, look, this still happens in the organisations, and Shane, look, my disclosure here is he's a good mate, but he's very empathetic, and so I'm sure he would drive that through the RFS. So again, I think that's brought that to the fore now.
And I agree with you. I think we're seeing that culture change coming through, and it should hopefully give hope to those that are feeling that that's not there yet. There's a hope that is moving forward. A beautiful comments come through. Just a comment to share with you. This person's older brother is now retired, is still on the boats. His children are members, and now his grandkids are members. Coincidentally, Steve, his son, is in the right squad as well as the club. Everything you say is just so true regarding the importance of family support. So for me, I chose the same road as you, 4th generation. So isn't that brilliant?
That's lovely.
Now, a personal question. Somebody's asked, is it lonely being the CEO? Which peers do you reach out to when you need support?
It's, I'm so blessed to be the CEO of Surf Life Saving New South Wales. I think it's just the best organisation. I'll put it right out there. But it is bloody lonely as the CEO. It's, you are the top of the tree. The higher the tree, the thinner the branches and the quicker they'll break. You feel vulnerable, you feel lonely. But for me, I've got a great team around me. I don't profess to know everything. I'll make some stupid mistakes every now and then as well. As the CEO, and let me tell you, some of the staff aren't backwards in calling it out. But that's, again, I think that's our culture. It's a great honour to be the CEO or to be the commissioner of any entity, because you can put your thumbprint on it, and long time down the track, you can still see your thumbprint in there. And I think for me, we've done some fantastic things for this organisation, but the thumbprint I love is what we're talking about today, is actually really embedding in it the theory and the concept and the support of mental well-being and health in the organisation.
It's the bit that keeps giving, isn't it? It's one of those that it's the genuine, and I think that we do bumble. We're human, so we are going to slip up and do things. And I think our staff being able to say it's a good sign that you got the right relationship with them. So it's a good thing. Don't see you moving anytime soon, that's for sure. So one question I had for you, because it has come through consistently, is from an organisational point of view, families don't often feel like they really contribute to an organisation, whether it's a family that's volunteering or whether it's the family of the staff that are first responders. What would you give as that, just that moment for families to hear how they do impact and influence an organisation and help it?
Look, and that's a really great point. And whether you're salaried or whether you volunteer, I know that every time that we used to step up to do a medal presentation or an award presentation, and you would have, all the families there as well, and you'd have the recipient up on the stage or the dais, to present them, whatever it was, the first acknowledgement and accolade would be turned back to the family, because a person can't do what they do. You can't be a first responder. You can't be a CEO. You can't be an executive. You can't be anyone in an organisation unless you have that support and the will of the family behind you. And they pick you up when you're down. Or they'll slap you down when you get too big for your boots. But for me, family is so important, particularly in the first responder environment. Like they're your watch keepers. They're your blanket. They're the ones that ground you as well. So if any of the families are listening today and you think, I don't really contribute, I think you're kidding yourself. I think you contribute a lot more than what you really think.
I totally agree. And I think it's something that, it goes back to us generally being quite giving people. We don't see the impact we're actually having just by being who we are and doing what we do. So we don't have long left. What I wanted to make sure, because I do see that passion that you have for wellbeing and being able to share these things on, what would be your top 3 or 4 tips in terms of proactive wellbeing management that you might have learned throughout your own life? If you had to give that magic wand option of 3 or 4 tips, what would they be?
Well, I think the first thing is you just got to be honest with yourself. You really just have to be honest with yourself and know that you at some point in your career will be impacted by this. So, one is honesty with yourself straight up. I think the second thing is you've got to give yourself permission to be vulnerable. So you've got to be brave enough to put yourself out there, because if you're not vulnerable, then you just can't move forward. In itself. Probably the third tip will be, and I spoke to someone the other day about this. I said, look, you can walk past anyone in the street and they will have a black dog walking by their side. I think everyone in life walks with a black dog, and it's just a matter of how you keep your black dog on your lead and your chain. I spoke earlier on about, the dark room with the light switch. I think that, that this third thing is you need to understand what is your light switch. So what pulls you back out, when you're in the bottom of that corduroy road or in that dark space. For me, it's exercise, but I'll tell you, and I was only thinking about this the other day, and it's so corny. The CEO of Surf Lifesaving, I actually love to get down in the surf, and the moment a wave washes over me, and I know this sounds ridiculous, I feel that it washes away the stress or the trouble. And I know so many people, and I know we've got quite a few staff, and they boast about it being down the beach early this morning before work, because I think they just want that wave to wash over them.
There's a lot to be said for water, though. Nature is very impactful in our well-being. The sensory sort of piece, as much as anything else, it's quite. But that wash away, it's the same as when people say that run. If I run, I'm running away from it. It's all released and I'm done, sort of thing. So, Steve, it's been amazing talking to you. I think we could continue talking for hours. So grateful for your time and you sharing. I think your comment about being vulnerable has been such an important one, because in such a senior role, and having been in other senior roles in other agencies, it's something that we need to start to recognise as a strength and a value, and the way we need to lead moving forward. So we need to help people work out what that switch is and how to manage those things, rather than pushing it under the rug and pretending it's not happening. So your input here has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been actually quite cathartic. So thank you.
That's a good thing. If anyone out there is feeling like they need help, we do want to share some links with you. So there are support agencies and resources if you are in a place where you're thinking, I need help, or my family need help and I don't know where to go. These are some of our suggestions in terms of where you can start to get that support and that help. So we really thank everyone for being part of this event this evening, and for sharing in the conversation and for sharing your thoughts. As you leave tonight, you will be offered a brief survey where you will get just a couple of questions. It's a less than a minute survey, which we really encourage and ask for you to share your thoughts in terms of what was valuable and what else you want to know from us. So your feedback to us will be what helps us in terms of being able to improve what we're doing and continue to support you. So hopefully you've all walked away with something tonight to help you in terms of where you're at and where your loved ones are. We have one more day of our summit, so we welcome you to join us tomorrow for our final 2 sessions. One will be a conversation with Judy Higgart, Paul Lloyd, and Kerry Howard in terms of what is a positive way in terms of strategies to move forward with your wellbeing, being engaged in the first responder community, and then we will do our closing session. As for tonight, I would like to thank you all for joining us and wish you a lovely evening. Thank you.